In this next video, in this series on codependency and 12-step groups, I'm going to talk about the two biggest tools that help me to heal the negative emotions, the resentment, especially some of the fear and the shame that I was feeling in that relationship, where I was healing this and almost completely recovered in 4 weeks, and really a really strong feeling of recovery within 8 weeks, which is incredible. I read online all the time. People have been 5 months out, 6 months out, 1 year out of a relationship, and they still are holding on to this pain. So I want to share this with you. Now, doing this with a sponsor in a 12-step program, in my opinion, is the best way to do this. You have someone else who's been where you're at, that's validating how you're feeling, and also is challenging you, challenging your projections. This to me is the best way, but whether you're in one or not, I think this can help you. So I really, really want to share this. This was inspired today actually by reading on a forum someone's own experience with resentment and not knowing how to do it. Like, how do I cure this? I can't speak to therapy. I can speak to 12 steps. So I'm going to speak about how I learned how to deal with this in 12 steps. And I totally understand that when we're in this up and down cycle, we feel like they're taking this thing and destroying it. They keep throwing a grenade. Every time things are calm, another grenade is thrown. And over time, the damage is cumulative. For us, for them, it doesn't seem like it's cumulative in the same way. But for us, it's very cumulative, where we're so hurt, we're so triggered, we're so vulnerable that to stay in the relationship, we have to create more and more and more projections that they could be healed, that we're self-gaslighting, we're finding ways to cope, to try to minimize our own feelings and stuff like that. And when we come out, all of our feelings come up, all that resentment we were pushing down. We have all these feelings, but the one thing that we haven't broken through yet, at least in my experience, was the projection, and even to see where we were being selfish. If we can fix these two things, if we can align these two things properly, those negative emotions that come up, we're processing them in a way, in my opinion, that is really, really healthy, and that gets us into a place of power where that feeling of that hatred, that they're evil, they were doing this, why did they do this, it will go away. You'll have a kind of acceptance that's really great. And it's by focusing on our own feelings, our own projections and stuff that do it. So I'm just going to jump into how I did this. So I'm going to quickly share a story, and I'm going to show you how I would use one of these steps to get over this. Okay. In the last video, I talk about my ex dumped me on my birthday. The full story, the shortened full story, is that a couple of weeks before my birthday, we broke up. It was really, really hard. We kept getting together every 3 days, every 1 week. And every time we got together, we would be sure we were never going to talk to each other, but then we'd sleep together, and she would ask that we get back together. Every time I said no. I was watching Mike's videos, but I wasn't doing the steps yet. I wasn't in a 12-step group or anything, but I knew it was wrong. Finally, on my birthday, the day before, I said, I don't want to get together with you. She wanted to take me out for dinner or lunch, actually. And I said, no, I don't want to do this because I don't want to be dumped. I don't want to be hurt on my birthday. She assured me, no, this isn't going to happen at all. We went for lunch. After lunch, she said, why aren't we together? Let's get back together. So I said, okay, yeah, let's try this out. That evening we got together, we got into a huge argument, and then she dumped me. She still slept over. We slept together. We said bye in the morning. That was the last time I saw her. It was really excruciating amount of pain for me. But I want to relay this story because I want to show what I did when this came up. And this came up a lot. Certain stories, certain memories with her that were more painful, they came up many, many times a day for me for weeks. And had I not been doing 12 steps, it would have been for months and months and months, right? I could still be hung up on this thing that happened, but I'm not, and I'll show you how I dealt with it. So let me just load this document. For those who don't know, part of 12 steps is connecting with a higher power. So a lot of stuff we do can involve some kind of prayer, some kind of higher power. For me, it seems super cult-like in the beginning. I was really skeptical about it, but I was in so much pain, I just sort of gave into it and said, okay, like clearly this worked for my sponsor. Clearly this worked for all the people in this group. So, fuck it, I'm just going to try it. And actually the higher power thing has become such an amazing part of my life. but we're not going to focus on that. But you'll see this writing in it because I want to show you exactly what I would write to my sponsor about the scenario. So I start here with the first sentence, which is, "Dear higher power, please remove my resentment towards my ex for dumping me on my birthday." So I just gave you a very short version of that story, but there's a very long version of that story. There's like a 3-hour version of that story that is much longer than the story itself that I relate to a lot of people after the demise of the relationship. That's where we get stuck in our resentment. Where you get stuck in your anger and where you get stuck in your resentment is actually this first sentence. All I'm saying here is, please remove my resentment towards my ex for dumping me on my birthday. That's all I'm saying here. But in early recovery, what I was saying to people was 3 hours long in a phone call conversation, or I could, dump a huge comment on a forum online and get people's opinion on it and stuff. Now, I probably know most people's opinion on it, which is, get the fuck out of here, leave this person. That's what friends would say to me too. But none of that worked to remove the anger. None of that worked to remove the sadness. This thing here worked. So I put this just as one sentence. The reason why, again, is as soon as I start to write this into a novel, I'm stuck in the resentment and I'm ruminating about it again and again. And if we're being really honest about ourselves, we're stuck in these resentments, over time, the story changes. And often over time, the way the story changes is it will change into me being even better and more innocent and more of a victim, and her being even more evil and more of a tyrant and this terrible person. So it kind of shifts like that. And this isn't good for us too. This also keeps us in a projection. Sometimes for me, it would even shift into like a fantasy where the argument would go all kinds of different ways. I'd imagine all these different arguments in my head and all these different outcomes. This is a way to be stuck and trapped in the feeling and stuck and trapped in the resentment. So here's how you remove it. Now, I want to say, just before I jump into the next sentence, actually, let me stop this for a second. I want to say before I jump into the next sentence that this is not about suppressing our emotions. This is not about dumping our emotions. This is not about not expressing them. If you need to express it with a therapist, do it. With friends, do it. No problem. This is about when they keep coming up and we keep reliving them. It means that the person who caused you that initial pain, they're not causing you pain anymore. You're causing yourself pain, right? This is self-inflicted pain that we can't get over. That's what a resentment is, right? That's what a hatred is. It's we keep doing this back to ourselves, even if it feels totally justified. And even if what happens to us was incredibly damaging, if we really want to live a better life, we have to find a way to process that emotion and get over it. What was explained to me from my sponsors, if I'm angry or sad, I can be angry and I can be sad. I can cry, whatever it is. But if it starts to turn into this resentment, if it turns into a shame or self-pity, then that's when it begins to damage me. That's when I'm doing damage to myself and I'm not living a life of freedom. And so let's go into this. So here's how you live a life of freedom. So first sentence, really simple. I don't go into details about the story towards dumping me on my birthday. That's it. Now I'm going to look at the dishonesty. It's dishonest because I also engaged in the fight and provoked her. So again, when I talked about that, I can make it bigger than it is. Here's where I try to make it a little more fair. We're 50-50 in this, right? It's dishonest because she was always prone to rage or distortions during a disagreement. So again, I'm being dishonest about what she's like. So in my resentment, I hate the fact that she acted like this. I hate the fact that she went over the top of the feelings, that she was enraged. She's distorting reality, all this stuff. I hate that happened. That's my resentment. But my resentment is dishonest. Like, you wouldn't, like, if rain is something natural that falls from the sky, you can't get angry at rain, or you can't get angry at a snake for being a snake. You can't get angry at a rabbit for being a rabbit, right? Like, we need to break through this. That's how she is. It's dishonest because she almost never kept her promises. So she promised, I'm not going to dump you on your birthday. Don't worry about it. Scouts on her, and did it. It's dishonest because I didn't want to be with her in the moment of the argument. So this relates kind of back to the first thing where I was also provoking the fight. So in that moment, I was really angry at her too. And I also felt like, what the fuck are we doing in this relationship? So she pulled the trigger before I did, but part of me wanted to as well. And that's my dishonesty, right? I wasn't just innocent. I also on some level had this motive, where I didn't want the relationship. Of course, I was mixed, and as was she. So the dishonesty gets through my projection. A huge thing that kept me in the relationship and suppressing my emotions was being dishonest about what's actually happening. And it keeps me in it afterwards as well. So this is going to burst that bubble all the time. Really, 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 really helpful. The second one is looking at where I'm selfish. So by selfish, this means that I don't like the way she acted. I don't like that she dumped me. I wish that she didn't. But it's actually selfish of me to want her to act any way that would kind of benefit me. This is tricky. It means in the future, in my current relationships, friendships, and things like that, if people start treating me badly, I just stop being friends. Like I disengage, with that relationship. So in this way, I'm looking out for myself, and we don't see it in the same way as selfishness. Selfishness would be someone keeps treating me like shit and I keep trying to control them so that they don't do that. That's selfish. They want to do that. That's how they are. That's the way that they act. And me trying to control them not to, this is selfish. I'm trying to control someone else's behavior. I can only control my own. So resentment is selfish because I don't want to take any blame for the demise of the relationship. All right. I'm pretending I had no control. It's selfish because I wanted her to break up with me the way I wanted it, but she's allowed to break up with me anytime she wants to and however she wants to do that. And actually this should be like this. Any way she wants me to do it, right? So that's her right. And if I'm going to be really, really honest about this resentment, had she broken up with me 3 days later because she actually did control her feelings then, I would still be angry that she didn't break up with me when she felt it, that she like held it and was dishonest. I would always find a way to be resentful about this. It's selfish for me to want her to love me or treat me in a way that I want. This is the harsh reality. This is the cold, hard reality of life in general. We can't force people to love us, and we can't force people to treat us how we want. We can set up boundaries. We can tell people what's acceptable and what isn't. And if they move outside of that in a way that is betraying us or that we really don't like, we just remove ourselves and we accept that that's who they are without holding resentment towards them. It's selfish of me to wish she would act like and be a person that she isn't. So she has a personality disorder, or very likely does. Even if she didn't, even if I didn't know what that was, the fact of the matter is she's treating me in ways that I really don't like, that make me feel really bad, that aren't loving. It's selfish of me to want her to treat me in a loving way, as crazy as that is. It's not selfish of me to want people in general or someone that I'm dating to treat me like that. That's not selfish. But if I'm engaged with someone and they keep doing it and I don't want them to, it's selfish for me to try to control them. So I'm looking at the ways I'm trying to control her. The dishonesty is breaking my projection, seeing where I'm selfish. It's showing actually where I have agency, where I have power. I'm going, oh my God, all along I was just trying to get this person to love me. But this was dishonest because she can't love me how I want. Okay, but I really want her to love me like this. I really want this. This is so selfish, but it's dishonest. She can't. I'll say, yeah, but sometimes she did. Okay, sometimes, but she was really inconsistent. So again, that's where I'm being dishonest. And it's really selfish for me to want her to do all the self-work, personal work to make a relationship work with me, right? And it's also selfish for me to want her to do the work and not me to do the work, right? Finally, what we do is we do a service at the end. So again, we ask that something be removed, and then we do a service. The service is very much a part of the 12 steps. We're trying to help other people who were suffering the way that we were in whatever the addictive or self-destructive behavior was. So we're always going to do some kind of service. I could just read a paragraph or so from in my fellowship, we use a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it could be the Coda book, whatever. Service could also be things like going to a meeting. Let me stop this share for a moment. Service could be things like going to a meeting and sharing. But what it ultimately does is the service gives you like a distraction. So if I wasn't doing 12 steps and I was trying to do this just as a way to heal, what I would suggest is ask whatever the universe, yourself, ask for yourself to give yourself permission to release the emotion, whatever it is, but make the request. Look at how it's dishonest, look at how it's selfish, and then refocus. And when you refocus, do it on something that ultimately is going to benefit you. For 12 steps, it's very clear the way we refocus, but if you're not in it, I don't know, read something Buddhist, or read something like, maybe spiritual in this way, or a self-help book, or drop down and do 10 push-ups. Like, do something that's going to benefit you. Don't distract yourself of like, okay, now I'm going to go watch a movie or read a book about whatever. Like, now I'm going to like go into something else, because this is kind of similar to, for a lot of us in these relationships, like, we've been using things outside of ourselves to distract ourselves from really focusing on us and how to heal ourselves. So you bring that healing back to you. This is a template. Okay, so we have 3 things we look at. Fear is a future-based trauma. A lot of fears for me around my ex in the beginning was running into them and being a loser. So still not being healed or recovered. Like, what if I run into my ex and I'm homeless, and she like drops me some money in a hat with her boyfriend before they get into the Lamborghini and take off on an amazing vacation. Like, it doesn't have to be that extreme, right? But we kind of feel like this, like, I have to be better than them in order to prove something, because in the abuse, they've destroyed your self-esteem, right? Now, remember, you're 50-50, so you've also allowed your self-esteem to be eroded and destroyed. So we already feel like we're below them, and the discard, we feel like we're super beneath them. And the biggest fear is that they get over us and we're fucked up forever. So we just don't want to show that. So I could do the same kind of thing around a fear. Resentment, I just went over. Resentment is the past. It's a trauma. It's usually anger, but not always. It could be reliving or refeeling something from the past. It's a dangerous place to stay. And then we have self-pity. Self-pity ultimately is shame. It's feeling unlovable or unworthy. So often in this cycle, at least I found, is my fears and my resentments would turn into self-pity. So I would fear running into my ex. What if she's better than me? What if she's with someone else? And then if I imagine that reality happening, I would turn into the self-pity of like, I'm such a loser and I'll never be lovable. No one will ever love me again. Or my resentment ends up turning into shame, because I think like, how did I let that happen? Like, I'm such an idiot. Why did I get together with her on my birthday, to take that example? Or why did I stay with this person? Okay. So we can look at it, we can look at the resentment, the fear, self-pity around a situation or around a specific person. Try to think of 1 or 2 reasons why it's dishonest, 1 or 2 reasons why it's selfish, and then you're going to refocus on something that is good for you. Our refocus in 12 steps is often sort of has this service component or spiritual component to it, but yours doesn't have to, as long as it's something good for you. Okay. So we can see here that there's different ways to deal with that you can do this to deal with these 3 emotions. It's not always easy on your own. That's why I think it's best if you do have a sponsor. They're going to challenge you. They're going to validate you. Sometimes my sponsor would write me back and say things like, actually, you're also selfish in these ways, or you're being dishonest about this or that. Or that first sentence, sometimes I would make like 5 sentences about it, and they'd be like, hey, you're here, you're trying to defend yourself already in this action, right? I'm still trying to be right. So there's, here's your dishonesty. Sometimes they would just validate me and say like, hey, it really sucks. It's really painful. They wouldn't say it really sucks. They say it's really painful when someone doesn't love us, or it's really painful when someone doesn't love us the way we deserve, or it's really painful when someone doesn't love us the way we want to be loved, right? And so sometimes it was just, sort of validating what I'd said, and that was really helpful for me too. The last thing, this was really, really hard, but the second tool, also monumental. So as I mentioned, I would write these 10 times a day, 20 times a day, 50 times a day as they come up to my sponsor, over and over and over again. Just thinking about it once was never enough. Doing it every single time, this is where you're going to get the healing. Like, this is where you're going to get it, because it just means that I have to keep bursting that projection. Every time it comes up, I have to burst it. See the reality, see the reality, see the reality. Eventually, I will do it so many times, for example, around this one issue, that anytime it comes up, it's just second nature. My mind is automatically going to process the whole thing. So if that birthday thing comes up, it processes it and gets rid of it even before I have time to really think about it. But when a new resentment comes up, whether it's about the ex or whether it's about something else, it might take me, sometimes it would take me 10 minutes to be like, okay, how am I being selfish? Wait, how am I being dishonest? Like, what do you mean? And this would take me time to do in the beginning. But then if that same one came up, I would remember what I'd written before, or I might even gain more insight to it and go, oh, yeah, I was also selfish in this way. I was also dishonest in this way. Almost every single one, there would always be something in the dishonesty about that they have a personality disorder. And there'd be something selfish about me trying to control that. Okay. Or, um, or the dishonesty might be around my own actions, and the selfishness might be me wanting to be perfect. So this was, those were often in it. But there's also always specific things too. But again, when you do it again and again, it just becomes second nature. Like if you're doing sports and you're practicing a certain technique again and again, when a situation comes up in a game, you know how to deal with it. Right? You just automatically move in that way. It's the same thing with this. That's how I learned to let go. But I had to do it 100 times a day if I had to do it 100 times a day. The last thing is this. I had a lot of resentment in the beginning. And after maybe a couple of weeks, my sponsor taught me to do this thing called the sick man prayer. Now, we did our own adaptation of it. So the sick man prayer is out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's also, I think, maybe in the Bible. I don't know. I'm not Christian. I've never read the Bible, maybe just small parts of it. But this really, really helped. And this was so fucking hard. And this one I wouldn't write to my sponsor. This one I would do by myself. So I could be walking down the street because I was so full of resentment. My sponsor was like, hey, like this can really help too. Try this out. And this was the hardest thing. I liked the other one better. This, I hated doing. I hated it, but I'm so happy I did it. Okay. So again, sick man prayer adapted version. So it would go like this. So let's just look at this. So say I've been doing like 100 resentments towards my ex that day, or 50 or 20, or just been doing them all week. I would then do this. Dear higher power, please remove my resentments towards my ex. So you can see here that I'm not going to, this one is non-specific. This one is just global, right? It's just general. It's just general, like this person's evil. I hate them, So please remove my resentment. I could say, please remove my hatred towards my ex, for she is also a sick person. I really want to point out that we use this word also. She's also a sick person. I don't say she's a sick person. She's also a sick person. So much of 12-step recovery is about taking responsibility and seeing that we're also in an illness, but our illness isn't a personality disorder. Our illness is called codependency. So she's also sick. So we're both sick, right? We're both fucked up. And then in ours, I never pray for myself, right? The only thing I might do a prayer towards is to remove what's called my character defects, or to remove my resentments, or, these negative things that are not helping me to be a better person in society. So in this case, but I can pray for you for, like, I hope you get your job, this job, you're applying for, but I would never pray, I hope I get the job. Never. We would never do it in this way that is selfish, at least in my fellowship, which for me, I really like. So, but I could pray for someone else. So I wish for her, or I could say, I pray for her, whatever I want to say, to be happy, healthy. So anything I want, I will wish for her. I hope for her to be happy, healthy, have lots of money, great relationships, be free of suffering. I could put in a lot of other things in here. Great sex, love, good marks in school, like whatever, great, heal her relationships with their family, have a great boyfriend, whatever. So I'm going to do this and wish this. Please save me from my resentment. Thy will, not mine, be done. Thy will. So we're using this God thing again. So like, hey, my higher power, like, I trust you. And I don't want to control the situation. So I'm not trying to control my own life. And so I did this all the time. And this was so fucking hard, because when I'm wishing for her to have these things, part of my mind is visualizing her have these things. But it's in a different way than before I was in recovery. Before I was in recovery, if I imagine her happy or with someone, I hated it. I was fearful. It meant she was right and I was wrong. It meant I have a problem and she doesn't. It meant that she might be able to get over me. It meant that, she doesn't deserve to be happy. I hope all of her relationships are fucked up. I hope all of her life is fucked up. Like, these are the kind of resentment and anger I had towards the end. Even though when I was in the relationship and things were okay, I would really try to be forgiving. I would imagine I'm forgiving. All I did was love unconditionally. I didn't really, because I had these resentments after, right? This is the real unconditional love, is for me to go like, well, if she heals through someone else for whatever reason, or she's happy for whatever reason, therapy or not, I should be happy for her, right? My Me wanting her to be happy and have a good life is very conditional, especially at the end of the relationship. It's really conditional. It's like, I only want her to be happy if I'm the cause of it and if it's because of me. This is really selfish. This is really controlling. And it's also really dishonest, because if I would have been able to bring her like this permanent happiness, it would have happened, but I couldn't. If there's one magical person in the world that's able to, if, I mean, I don't think so, but if, even if, well, it's definitely not me, or it would have been me. So this is how we deal with it. Over time, there's times when I really meant it. I could feel like love emanating from me towards her, of like, hey, I hope she's doing really well. Like, I really hope so. Other times I didn't mean it. Oh, I hope she's happy. Oh, and I'd feel all this resentment, but I'd push myself through it anyways. And doing it over time, again, it helped me to visualize her life in a good way. And for me to have like that hope for it, removed a lot of my fear of, what if I run into her and she's here and I'm here? Yeah, well, I've been praying for her to be there. So great. It worked, and for me, my own path and the way I do it. This is why, thy will, not mine, be done, is like, well, my own path is kind of this intimate bond between me and this idea of a higher power. And so that's what's leading me. And if it's not my, if I were one day to strike gold, that, it would still be through my efforts, but it's maybe because that's part of the path that I'm supposed to be on. And if it's never going to be like that, then maybe that's also part of the relationship. That's part of the path I'm supposed to be on. So it's kind of this acceptance around things like that. And I'll get into that in a different video, but I hope that these two skills can help people who are still full of resentment, fear, or shame. You don't have to be, and that's it. I hope this helps.